Washington, Jay Gruden, he did not survive his 5 a.m. wake-up call, and he probably knew that the writing was on the wall. It sounded like he drove to Ashburn, Virginia, to the Redskins facility at about midnight, cleaned out his office, got a shower, took a nap, and got fired. So I don't know if he got fired, Eric. Was that the best for him? Did he just get put out of his misery at this point? But when you hear the dysfunction from this Washington franchise, from Dan Snyder down, the fact that Dan Snyder had some kind of a connection to Dwayne Haskins through high school and where his kids went, and that was the reason, one of the reasons he wanted to take Haskins. Jay Gruden wasn't on board. Gruden leaks the pick to try to put pressure on the organization not to take Haskins. You got all this stuff going on behind the scenes. That's just a small piece of this dysfunction, but getting fired for Jay Gruden, was that actually the best thing for his career at this point?
Yes, I was actually going to say that. I didn't know where you were going with this question, but my response was going to be, he's probably happy at this point. Yeah. He doesn't have to finish the season out with this team that's really, really struggling. I think he gets to just kind of recoup and wait to see what he's going to do from here. I think the realistic possibility is that he becomes a staff member for another head coach within the very short future, maybe spends a year, 2, 3 years doing something like that, and then gets another chance down the road. He put in his time at Washington, and there was just too many things that were dysfunctional. And I think you're right. I think a guy like Dan Snyder has proven through the years that he just makes a lot of mistakes, that he's hard to work under. I wouldn't say he's as bad as a guy like Jerry Jones or something like that, but there's certainly things there that make it hard for a head coach to do their job. And you look at the fact that Washington has had a lot of head coaches over the last decade, 2 decades. It's not like anyone stays there for any length of time. This isn't, Joe Gibbs the first time around in the 90s. This is every 3-4 years, sometimes even less than that. Guys are coming through there and then they're out of there. They're coming through there and then they're out of there. It just isn't a good pattern in Washington. So I'm not even going to say much about Jay Gruden as far as whether or not he could be a good head coach in this league, because at this point, I don't know that I'm even sure. I think that he dealt with a lot of adversity with the different things going on with that roster. And if given a second chance, maybe he does better at a different place. So I think at the end of the day, he's pretty happy about this.
Yeah, I think he's got to be at this point just to get out of that mess. This season is going nowhere for this team. You're going to just rack up all those losses on your record. A lot of finger point would go back at you. I think just the way this whole thing was handled, he comes out looking even better than he probably ever expected. The fact that it got reported that they brought him in at 5 a.m. just to let him go, that's just so petty and ridiculous.
Childish, yeah.
That's up there with like USC firing Lane Kiffin and not letting him get on the bus or the plane to go home. I mean, just have a little bit of professionalism about yourself. And that's the one thing you hear about Washington and some of the stories of just Snyder and his ego. And then you start to look at the fact of it, the reports is Tomlin is on the top of their coaching wish list. I don't understand, Eric, why any coach in this league that's proven themselves and is a commodity would want to go run this organization. I know that there's only 32 jobs out there, but why do you want to go put yourself into a situation that no one else has been able to work, and you really don't have the pieces to build around? No one even knows if Dwayne Haskins is ready. And if him coming into that Giants game is any indication, he is not close right now. So you're talking about having to bring in, deal with Haskins, eventually maybe move on and draft another quarterback. How much of a leash is Snyder going to give you at that point? Will he bring in someone else because you couldn't get it done with his guys? So I feel like they're going to have a hard time trying to get anyone on this team to coach it that's a commodity. I feel it's going to be somebody under the radar, or they're going to have to go out and just pay someone a enormous amount of money just to, so it's like, well, I can't turn down $12 million a year, even if this place is a complete train wreck, a la Phil Jackson with the Knicks. It's like, okay, I'll go in and collect a check,
right,
and I'll take the losses on my record, and I'll walk away with $36 or $48 million of your money, if that's what it's going to take. But they're just so dysfunctional.
And look, I know Pittsburgh's falling on tough times right now, but why is Tomlin just going to jump ship at this point? I mean, he has 13, 14 years in Pittsburgh with a storied franchise, a franchise that by all accounts is a pretty good franchise to work for. And he's never had a losing record, I don't believe, as his time as a head coach in Pittsburgh. That might change this year, but I don't think you just throw the baby out with the bathwater after one tough season. And if you do, then you're not good head coaching material anyway. And I wouldn't say that about Tomlin. I've had my issues about Tomlin, the way he controls certain things, but I'm not going to sit here and say that he's a bad head coach in the league. He certainly is not. So I can't see him having a half a season of a little bit of a problem in Pittsburgh and then saying, oh, well, Washington looks better to me.
Why would you want to go from the Rooney family to an owner that you have to refer to as Mr. Snyder? And no matter how old you are, according to some of the stories that are out there, that he doesn't even want the players to make eye contact with him. Why would you want to go play for someone like that or have anything to do with an organization like that? I don't know, Eric, why Dan Snyder would think that Tomlin would even entertain coming there unless he's going to give him a piece of the team, give him some kind of ownership, or just make him an offer that he just simply can't refuse. It's a complete different situation than Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's one of the best run franchises. That's why everybody's freaking out that they're 1-4. And how could they make a trade and go get Fitzpatrick? Because it's unlike what we've seen of them because they've always been so well run. I just think Washington's going to have a hard time attracting a top head coach. Eric, another guy that's found himself on the hot seat, and I'm not sure when his time's running out, but I got to think that the clock is ticking despite what Arthur Blank has said. And that is Dan Quinn. This Falcons team is a complete disaster. They're 1-4. They just gave up 53 points to Houston. So when does Dan Quinn's time run out in Atlanta?
Should have been yesterday. Look, I'm serious.
Well, then.
I'm serious. This guy, look at what they did.
That was the perfect time for sure.
Look at what they did to coach themselves into a loss in the Super Bowl. Let's just start there. Let's start with the fact that they coached themselves to a loss in the Super Bowl. And then from that point forward, they've never, ever got their mojo back. I don't know how you keep a head coach at that point. You're wasting years now with Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, guys in the backfield like Freeman. You're absolutely wasting your time. Now you've got young talent with Calvin Ridley, guys like that, and you just don't have that kind of time. So Arthur Blank can say what he wants, but to me, the answer is yesterday. I think Quinn should be fired.
I think this team has given up on Quinn. And when he wants to take a more active role on the defense, being a play caller, injuries aside, you gave up 53 points. That is ridiculous.
How are you ever going to win when you do that in the NFL? 53.
The Carolina Panthers, I know the Carolina Panthers went into Houston and they gave up 10? And you give up 53? They are wasting away talent here. And look, we've talked about Matt Ryan. I don't know how good he is. He makes some bad decisions still in football games. But you've got the weaponry on the offensive side where you should at least be scoring with teams, but you can't stop anybody, and they're just so inconsistent. I don't even know who's there to take over if they turn it over to Dirk Cutter or what they do at this point, and maybe that's part of the problem is they don't have anyone else to turn to.
Jay Gruden's available.
I think Jay Gruden's going to find his way to Oakland, go get a cushy job as like pass coordinator with John and do the Oogie Boogie or what the hell ever he was doing over there in London. But you're right. At this point, all Atlanta's showing me is they've given up on the season from an ownership part and a front office standpoint. They've given up. They're 1-4. This team has no direction. They are getting their ass kicked literally every time they're out on the field. They can't beat anybody at this point, and they just got embarrassed in Houston. So I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. I think if they, especially going to Arizona in week 6, oh my Lord, if they find a way to lose to Arizona as bad as they've played, they actually may have a reason to leave Dan Quinn in Arizona.
Yeah.
I actually might not take any umbrage if they don't let him on the flight. They make him take like a Southwest flight. They're out of Phoenix back to Atlanta.
Well, let's have a little fun here, Justin. I know I'm going to owe you 2 Tervis tumblers already, so we're not going to make this for a Tervis tumbler because you've not only got the catalog out, you've not only got the page open to the Denver Broncos, but at this point, you've probably highlighted model numbers that I'm going to be buying you here because the Jets are awful. The Philadelphia Eagles may or may not win that division. And so I'm not going to bet a tumbler, but let's have a little fun. Does Dan Quinn make it through this year as a coach?
No, the way he does that. I mean, if he does, I owe you a Tervis tumbler. And probably someone in Atlanta will probably buy one for you just from the fact that we actually stood up here week 5 and said the guy should be let go. Hell, he probably should have been let go after the 28-3 lead that he let slip away in the Super Bowl. It's probably the point where this team really started doubting him very seriously. And it looks like now, Eric, the clock should be run out. So hell no, I'm taking the whatever, the under.
Well,
I guess.
It's starting to look to me like that's when he lost the locker room. And, you want to give the team a second chance the season following that Super Bowl loss. Of course, they didn't follow it up with a good season. Now we have an absolute train wreck this season. So to me, the locker room just doesn't trust this guy. They don't believe in his play calling. They don't believe in his strategy. I just think his game planning is bad. I don't think he makes it through this year either, because there are definitely losses coming in this schedule. The fact that they're 1-4 already, Justin, this could be a team with a losing record at the end of the year.
They're staring up 2 games at the Panthers, who are playing Kyle Allen, who 90% of NFL fans wouldn't even know who that was a few weeks ago. That team is 2 games better than Atlanta, with Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu, Devontae Freeman, Austin Hooper, all those guys healthy on the offensive side.
Wow.
And there's 2 games sitting back of the Panthers, who are basically using Kyle Allen and going to run McCaffrey to death. There's 2 games back of them. And then when you start looking at that South division, how tough those games will be of getting through the Saints and the Bucks and the Panthers, I just don't see how there's any pathway for Dan Quinn to make it through the season with Atlanta. So, Eric, no better way to end segment 2 than to talk about a little international incident or debacle or complete train wreck or hypocrisy or wherever you want to go with this story.
Are we going into politics? Are you talking about Trump here?
No, actually, I was not going to talk about Trump, but I have a feeling he's going to creep up in this because the NBA has put themselves on the high horse. I think they spend most of their offseason carefully crafting their soapboxes for Steve Kerr and Greg Popovich and LeBron James and Adam Silver and everybody else to climb up on and point their finger down at any incident or any event or any social injustice here in the U.S. that they find not of their liking. And then when things happen in China, when $4.5 billion in revenues on the line, it's tough to get a comment from anyone. So, Eric, this whole situation started with what seemed to be a simple tweet from Daryl Morey. It has blown up into quite the firestorm here for the NBA. They were supposed to be over there on a goodwill tour. It has turned out to anything but that. So what are your thoughts here on this whole situation with the NBA in China? For some reason, Eric, it took the NBA completely screwing this up to bring people like Beto O'Rourke and Elizabeth Warren and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio all together on the same team. You know you have an incident when you bring the left and the right together.
It's unbelievable to me in a couple of different ways. Number one, look, this is international politics at its finest because we have governments of other countries doing things that we may or may not agree with. And yet, isn't it such an American position to think that we can speak on that? And we have the freedom of speech to do that. Adam Silver is correct when he's giving his synopsis of what happened with Maury's tweet. Yes, as American citizens and as a freedom of speech, we have the right to say whatever we want. But was it necessary or was it needed? Probably not. And so here's a situation where you have this, like you said, this sort of friendship tour, this let basketball build relationships. And we're over there talking about what's going on in their Hong Kong politics. It's nearly a humanitarian crisis over there. I don't think we really need as athletes to be involved. Now, let's just step this back to 50,000 feet and say it like this. And I'll kind of leave my political position at this point right here, which is to say you and I have warned these athletes, not that they listen to our show, but we have warned the athletes and the owners and general managers and whoever else in athletics, when you want to open your mouth and have a position on politics, then you have to be prepared to deal with the consequences. And I think Adam Silver has alluded to that as well. But I also see Adam Silver basically getting up there and playing both sides so that he can try to balance the tightrope here that he's walking. But I'm talking about the GM. I'm talking about other players. I'm talking about guys like Kerr, who now all of a sudden, aren't as woke as they thought they were. Here's the bottom line. When you open your mouth about politics, and now you're not even talking about American politics, you're talking about international politics, you have to be prepared for the kickback that you get. And if that messes up your business relationships or costs you money with other governments and other cultures, you're going to have to live with that because, yes, you had the freedom of speech. No one's trying to take that away, but now you've got consequences to deal with.
And that's my whole problem with this. Look, it's not saying that what happens in China is good. We're not taking that. But the NBA, some of their top coaches, their top players have been patted on the back to the point where they all should have AC joint sprains because of how just much love they get for everything they say. because it's easy for them here in the States. Their fans are more left-leaning. They're younger. Their TV partners the same way. They can pretty much say and do and attack whatever issues and whatever they want, and there's no repercussions here. What do you think that LeBron James or Steve Kerr or Greg Popovich